This video details the scope, topography and climate of London. Scope. London, also known as Greater London, is one of 9 regions of England and the top subdivision covering most of the city's metropolis. The City of London at its core once comprised the whole settlement, but as its urban area grew, the Corporation of London resisted attempts to amalgamate the city with its suburbs, causing London to be defined several ways. 40% of Greater London is covered by the London Post Town, in which London forms part of postal addresses. The London Telephone Area Code, 020, covers a larger area, similar in size to Greater London, although some outer districts are excluded and some just outside included. The Greater London boundary has been aligned to the M25 motorway in places. Further urban expansion is now prevented by the Metropolitan Green Belt. Although the built-up area extends beyond the boundary in places, producing a separately defined Greater London urban area. Beyond this is the vast London commuter belt. Greater London is split for some purposes into Inner London and Outer London and by the River Thames into North and South, with an informal Central London area. The coordinates of the nominal centre of London, traditionally the original Eleanor Cross at Charing Cross near the junction of Trafalgar Square and Whitehall, are about 51 degrees 30 minutes 26 seconds north 00°07, 39 W. However, the geographical centre of London on one definition is in the London Borough of Lambeth, 0.1 miles to the northeast of Lambeth North Tube Station. Topography. Greater London encompasses a total area of 1,583 square kilometres, 611 square miles. An area which had a population of 7,172,036 in 2001 and a population density of 4,542 inhabitants per square kilometre, 11,760 per square mile. The extended area known as the London Metropolitan Region or the London Metropolitan Agglomeration comprises a total area of 8,382 square kilometres, 3,236 square miles, has a population of 13,709,000 and a population density of 1,510 inhabitants per square kilometre, 3,900 per square mile. Modern London stands on the Thames, its primary geographical feature, a navigable river which crosses the city from the southwest to the east. The Thames Valley is a floodplain surrounded by gently rolling hills including Parliament Hill, Addington Hill, and Primrose Hill. Historically, London grew up at the lowest bridging point on the Thames. The Thames was once a much broader, shallower river with extensive marshland at high tide. Its shores reached 5 times their present width. Since the Victorian era, the Thames has been extensively embanked, and many of its London tributaries now flow underground. The Thames is a tidal river, and London is vulnerable to flooding. The threat has increased over time because of a slow but continuous rise in high water level by the slow tilting of the British Isles, up in Scotland and Northern Ireland and down in southern parts of England, Wales and Ireland, caused by post-glacial rebound. In 1974, a decade of work began on the construction of the Thames Barrier across the Thames at Woolwich to deal with this threat. While the barrier is expected to function as designed until roughly 2070, concepts for its future enlargement or redesign are already being discussed. London has had a small number of earthquakes over the years, notably those of 1750, which macroseismic information dictates were clearly epicentered directly under the city. In 2018, Two active faults were discovered running parallel to each other, directly under the center of the city. Furthermore, the city has been damaged at least twice, including fatalities, in the earthquakes of 1382 and 1580. Those earthquakes being epicentered under the London's building code is being redrawn so that every new structure must be able to withstand an earthquake of at least 6.5 on the Richter. Climate. London has a temperate oceanic climate. Rainfall records have been kept in the city since at least 1697, when records began at Kew. The most rainfall in 1 month is 7.4 inches, 189 millimeters, in November 1755, and the least is 0 inches, 0 millimeters, in both December 1788 and July 1800. Mile End also had 0 inches, 0 millimeters, in April 1893. The wettest year on record is 1903, with a total fall of 38.1 inches, 969 millimeters, and the driest is 1921, with a total fall of 12.1 inches, 308 millimeters. The average annual precipitation amounts to about 600 millimeters, which is half the annual rainfall of New York City, but also lower than Rome, Lisbon, and Sydney. Nevertheless, despite its relatively low annual precipitation, London still receives 109.6 rainy days on the 1.0 mm threshold annually. Temperature extremes in London range from 38.1 degrees Celsius, 100.6 degrees Fahrenheit, at Kew on the 10th of August 2003, 173, down to minus 16.1 degrees Celsius, 3.0 degrees Fahrenheit, at Northolt on the 1st of January 1962. Records for atmospheric pressure have been kept at London since 1692. The highest pressure ever reported is 1049.8 millibars, 31.00 in Hg, on the 20th of January 2020. Summers are generally warm, sometimes hot. London's average July high is 23.5 degrees Celsius, 74.3 degrees Fahrenheit. On average each year, London experiences 31 days above 25 degrees Celsius, 77.0 degrees Fahrenheit, and 4.2 days above 30.0 degrees Celsius, 86.0 degrees Fahrenheit. During the 2003 European heatwave, prolonged heat led to hundreds of heat-related deaths. There was also a previous spell of 15 consecutive days above 32.2 degrees Celsius, 90.0 degrees Fahrenheit, in England in 1976, which also caused many heat-related deaths. A previous temperature of 37.8 degrees Celsius, 100.0 degrees Fahrenheit, in August 1911 at the Greenwich station, though this was later disregarded as non-standard. Droughts can also, occasionally, be a problem, especially in summer, most recently in summer 2018, and with much drier than average conditions prevailing from May to December. However, the most consecutive days without rain was 73 days in the spring of 1893. Winters are generally cool with little temperature variation. Heavy snow is rare, but snow usually falls at least once each winter. Spring and autumn can be pleasant. As a large city, London has a considerable urban heat island effect, making the center of London at times 5 degrees Celsius, 9 degrees Fahrenheit, warmer than the suburbs and outskirts. This can be seen below when comparing London Heathrow, 15 miles, 24 kilometers, west of London, with the London Weather Centre.